I'd like to call the Thursday, July 2nd, 2015 Papillion City Council meeting to order. Mrs. Butler, would you please take the roll?
Florence. Here. Mumgard. Here. Gaines. Here. Glover. Jaworski. Here. Klug. Here. Stubbe. Here. Ingberg.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And do we have an affidavit of publication on file?
That is correct.
And a current copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the council chambers. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion. Motion by Councilman Gaines. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item C1, Ordinance 1715, an ordinance to annex certain real estate to the city of Papillion, Nebraska, and to provide for an effective date. Again, this is Prairie Queen Recreation Area Public Works Facility, SID 217, and designated adjacent properties and right-of-ways. Do we have a motion to approve Ordinance 1715? Motion by Councilman Mumgard. Second by Councilman Florence. Council discussion. I did want to make one brief comment just before council, give a little bit of context. Primarily want to do this for the benefit of people that watch this on TV. We do record these and replay them. I want to do a little bit, give a little bit of education, some context to all the discussions, hopefully some facts, and remove some of the emotion and the speculation that's involved in the process. I'm going to start a little bit with big picture and then go down to some specific questions that people have asked. Some of the big picture. This is a process that is ripe for confusion. Annexation and SIDs, the way it works in Nebraska is very unique in the entire nation. It was established by the legislature, and it's not generally understood by the public and even some elected and professional officials within the state, and I'd even say within the county a little bit. And that, of course, naturally adds to confusion and questioning when the processes that are legally followed, like Papillion is, when they're being used as intended. Other thing about the big picture is the idea of local control. Local control is a concept that does not exist in the state of Nebraska. A lot of states in the nation, a city can do anything it wants to unless the legislature specifically tells them they can't. State of Nebraska reverses that. A city can't do anything unless the legislature specifically enables it and allows it. Anything we do, we have to be able to point to the enabling legislation from the state legislature that gave us that authorization, concept called Dillon's Rule. So we must follow the processes and the rules as they're established by the legislature and the courts, and that includes the time frame and the process for annexation. One of the other things from a general perspective is the idea of different types of cities. State legislature, by design, created different classes of cities. In Sarpy County itself, we have two of those. We have cities of the first class, Bellevue, Papillion, and La Vista, and we have what they call second-class cities, Springfield and Gretna. A city of the first class, like Papillion, the state legislature granted by right the 2-mile zoning jurisdiction. A city of the second class, the legislature only allowed them 1 mile. So those are very important for context. A little bit specific though, a lot of this discussion is Highway 50 and Capehart to Schramm. I wanted to give a little context on that. The city of Papillion today already has many SIDs that are south of Schramm. And actually south of that they actually butt up against Capehart. The majority of our existing ETJ is already south of Capehart, including almost up to 132nd Street. The Gretna boundary agreement that we signed 4 to 5 years ago also anticipated us being south of Schramm way out west because there's a point on the interstate at 180th. That's south of Schramm. That's into the boundary agreement that the City Council of Gretna and the City Council of Papillion both unanimously approved and was a public record as well. The county itself anticipated Capehart from 2 different perspectives. When the county was doing site selection for the baseball stadium, the county came to Papillion, said, we would like to put it here. Would you extend your sewer and water there? So by definition, they intended that to be the city of Papillion. Because of the state legislation definition of a city of first class, that by nature extended 2 miles beyond that, which is Capehart. The county knew that, put that in play. If people don't think that that is logical, the county itself worked with the NRD a few years ago, 2012, to define the Prairie Queen relationship and where that was going to be. That was specific contractual language that Prairie Queen would be at some point in time annexed by the city of Papillion prior to a date certain, and the county was a signer on that interlocal agreement. And so again, by virtue of the state legislator's definition of a first-class city, 2 miles beyond that is Capehart, which is what we're doing now. So the county itself has always known Capehart as well. In regards to boundary discussions, we've been talking for several years with Springfield, and it's been in the context of regional growth. Early in 2014, and some of this blends into the school district discussions, late 2013, early 2014, when we were talking about school boundaries and city boundaries, there was a point in there where, in cooperating with Springfield, we developed a planning map to say how big could Springfield grow, even just within their own ETJ. Without extending their ETJ at all, they could grow to be a city of 20 to 25,000 and still be slightly south of Capehart. That's bigger than the city of Papillion today within our city limits. And even with that, they would still have eastern growth and southern growth to go beyond that 25,000 number. Then there's the future I-80 interchange, wherever that's going to be, which is only going to increase the viability of that eastern growth. So the idea that Springfield is stunted, Springfield is not stunted with this normal and anticipated annexation. As far as some growth patterns have been a part of these boundary discussions whenever we get together over the last few years. One of the things that I've shared consistently, both publicly and privately, is Western growth is natural and known. Growth is going down the 370 corridor, no question about that. What's not as logical and knowable is the southern growth. You start growing south, we bump into the school boundaries, which leads into the learning community and the common levy issues, causes some unnatural growth. We bump into the ridge line, and the sewage system is not in place, so the development's not occurring yet. And some of the road infrastructure. When's Platteview Road going to build out? So there's a lot of unknowns with the southern growth. So how do you determine what the growth pattern is down south? It's not knowable and predictable yet. So what we've been saying consistently in the boundary discussions is, since we will work with the natural growth patterns, and when you think of south, we don't know what those are, so how do we define where the boundaries would be? But what we have always said, and will continue to say, is as we grow and our boundaries come together, we will always respect another jurisdiction's ETJ and not encroach in that. The annexation of Prairie Queen, which was anticipated, and that 2 mile ETJ is almost to Capehart, not quite. But again, the Prairie Queen being in Papillion was expected and required at some point in time by the county. And again, that 2 miles beyond that parameter was established by the legislature for a city of the first class. This is a normal annexation process that was established by the state. It's not a land grab, it's not a war, it's a normal process for those that understand the process, and it should have been anticipated by those that know the process. The time frame for the process also was established by the rules of the legislature, and all the actions of Papillion were communicated in advance, including calls to administrators, calls to mayors, publication of our agenda with the full council packet to cities and administrators and to the media. This annexation does respect Springfield's existing ETJ and does not encroach on any other city's jurisdictional boundary. So for the future, we recognize that Sarpy County is the smallest county in Nebraska, and this is important for the public. This is the smallest county in the entire state. It's a county with 5 towns. You're going to be hard-pressed to find another county with 5 towns. So you compress so much in a small area. There will be conflict at different points in time, and the best analogy that I give people is a very large family living in a very small house. There will be conflict sometimes amongst the family. We've had, and we will continue to have, growth discussions with everybody, but it's going to be in the context of solving the larger issues of county growth, especially the sewage south of the ridgeline. Our boundaries will begin to self-define and come clear as the development patterns are understood based on school actions, learning community, common levy, regional sewer solutions, county road projects, and private market development. So from that, it's very realistic that a boundary agreement at some time would be a component of a larger growth strategy, but primarily within the context of the future regional sewer solution. So there's been some specific questions, about 4 or 5 of them. One was some belief, I believe, that we're doing this because of the NRD and those other 2 dam sites. What's important to realize is those dam sites were prioritized several years ago by the NRD in a very public process. When they decided then to start the work on those and letting of the bid for engineering, that was also a very public process, and they're in that design right now. So with or without this annexation, that's occurring. These are truly independent. There was also a question about why would we want to go grab land that's in Springfield School District and in the southern drainage area. 2 very important facts related to that question. First, most of our existing ETJ today for decades has been in the Springfield School District in the southern sewer. I don't think people realize our ETJ today goes past Fairview and almost to Platteview at 84th Street. Another fact is we already have more acres in our ETJ in the Springfield School District and that southern sewer district than the city of Springfield in their city limits and their ETJ together. So we're already larger represented in those areas than Springfield is. So to do a little bit more land in those same districts, again, carries the natural growth that we've been having. The Farm Bureau yesterday raised a very good question. They had a concern about the maintenance of Prairie Queen, and he was talking about the thistles. That's actually one of the driving forces of why we're doing this. The NRD opened the dam site, didn't have money for maintenance. That is eventually going to be ours. We cannot let that run down. Those are huge assets. Look at Walnut Creek. It's been recognized as one of the best regional parks in the metro area because of the way the city of Papillion maintains that. Prairie Queen comes in, that will be maintained at the same level, and this annexation package has the funding mechanism in place for that maintenance. Walnut Creek was built and developed with the exact same agreement as Prairie Queen. There's some very valid questions and concerns and confusion about the impact of natural urbanization on agricultural land and prices and taxes and that. Very valid. And some taxes may go up, and we need to be proponents and see what we can do to mitigate that. But on the landowner profit side, at some point in time, it's important to understand right now, and these are my figures, so they may not be accurate, but I work a little bit in this world, so I might know a little bit. Rural agricultural land right now is probably selling, depending on where you are, in the range of $3,000 to $10,000 an acre. An 80-acre parcel, that's going to bring you about $240,000 to $800,000 for that 80. The developing urbanized ground is selling in the range of $50,000 to $100,000 on the corridor. That's $4 million to $8 million for that same 80. So as it moves from rural ag to urbanized developable ground, you're moving from profits of hundreds of thousands to millions. One of the things, though, we are having a real impact on that Track F, and Mr. Hoynes talked about it a little bit yesterday, and it's not much different than when we worked with the landowner who had the 80 where SAC headquarters went in. Some very similar impacts, and what we agreed with that landowner, and it's what we want to do with Track F, or we've offered, is the city can bring a lot to the table to help that landowner to set up for that potential future sale when and if they want to sell, not when we say to sell. But we can work with them to say, what's their vision for that ground? What's their dream for that land when it transitions? And also, what do we see as the highest and best use? And through that cooperative effort with the planning department, we can actually update our comprehensive plan to meet their vision and update the future land use map. So at the point in time they go to sell and negotiate, it's already in our comp plan, which theoretically would raise their value. And we did that with the landowner on the SAC ground, and that's what we want to offer here as well. Typically on a land sale, the entire cost of that process is on the landowner and developer. In the SAC project, we brought that on our side, and we did that, and it didn't cost the landowner. And that's one of the things we're offering here a little bit to help mitigate a little bit of that tax increase. There was also a question about, can't we just stay small and just focus on downtown? Cities grow and progress. That's a fact. We've done a lot of comprehensive planning, and we've got some very long-standing agreements that have always anticipated Papillion on the Highway 370 corridor being around 48th and 60th on the east and I-80 on the west because of the Gretna Agreement. This annexation only does what was always anticipated and planned and does not go beyond that. I've had somebody mention, well, you're just grabbing some fees and that's why you're doing it. Again, not the case. When we got to I-80 with our zoning jurisdiction, because of the Gretna boundary agreement, we're not extending ETJ over the interstate. Based on the way that agreement is written, we had every right to go over the interstate. So if this was about fees, our ETJ would be extending even farther than it is to the west. But we're staying with the intent of that agreement from a planning perspective. And also then the strong economic development and growth, I believe, is both the elected and the administration's responsibility, is to make sure the city stays viable. However, we can't forget the original core of downtown, so that comment is not discounted, and I believe we put a lot of emphasis on downtown and keeping that viable. So just to close real quick, this is a legal and normal annexation as well established by the state and anticipated by the county. It does not encroach on Springfield's ETJ and in fact respects their existing ETJ. They are not stunted. They can grow in excess of 25,000, larger than the city of Papillion and its city limits today. It's natural and expected western growth. We've been active and we will continue to have open discussions with all the parties, including Springfield, on the future growth of Sarpy County in all 5 cities. The larger discussion of growth absolutely will continue, and that'll include likely how do Springfield and Papillion ETJs come together. That could include a future boundary agreement, and it could also include some subsequent requests to the county to square off some of the ETJ and ask them to cede jurisdiction into either ETJ. So the larger discussion must continue to understand the impact of the arbitrary school boundaries, and then the solution for the regional sewer infrastructure. I shared personally with Mayor Dill and several county commissioners that from Papillion's perspective, the next major point in regional growth discussions is the regional sewer study for south of the ridgeline, and Papillion administration has already agreed in principle to contribute to that, so we'll be part of that solution. I also shared with Mayor Dill just earlier this week, I understand community pride and vision for the future. We have it in Papillion, and I'm never going to apologize for it. And I understand he has it, and he is a good mayor. We value the relationship with all the cities, including Springfield, and we will continue to work together for all of Sarpy County and the strength of its cities, both the first-class and the second-class cities, but we're going to ensure Papillion's strong and healthy future. Council discussion, Mr. Ingberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, the mayor addressed almost everything I had in my little thought process, but I will say this. You know, I do understand the Greenbelt law, probably because I've been around a long time. I'm old and understand how that works. But I guess what I come back to, one of the things I come back to is it appears the NRD is going to do what they're going to do. I mean, they've already voted and approved or set aside what funding they need to create another recreational area in the watershed for flood control. That being said, you know, that's going to happen no matter what we do tonight, no matter how we vote tonight, I think. But that also means that we're, as the mayor said, you may be left with, on track F especially, you may be left with a portion that's not purchased by them. With that remaining land, to me, and the mayor mentioned this as well, that we've already done this before, and I hope we could do this if this passes. On the remaining land, to me, what's really important is we work with the owners of that property to make sure it's planned, zoned, and done so in a fashion that the value is very high to everyone that's involved in that property as some type of remedy to the situation. I'm also hoping too that through the city's help, we can do something with any increase in taxes, and I hope that it only lasts for a year since you pay them in arrears. I'm hoping that the NRD proceeds in such a fashion that perhaps that only happens one time at most before the rest of it develops. But be that as it may, I think we're very fortunate here. We have a great planner and a great planning department, and I've seen what they could do, and I think they could help a great deal. But perhaps we could help discount the taxes by doing something through the planning department. Also, it's possible that just by virtue of the time that it won't be a burden. And finally, I guess the last thing I want to mention is I do understand, believe it or not, I do understand the concept of family farms. Relatives of mine worked on farms, they've owned farms. I understand that. But one thing I hope you understand, everybody understands also, is that when all of us were placed here by the people that voted for us, we have an obligation to make sure we look out for their interest. And I will tell you that 24, 25 years ago, whatever it was, when I first sat down here, the very first thing that I always said, and I've said it all along, is Papillion is going to grow no matter what we do or don't do. It just is. But everybody likes Papillion that has a feeling of a community, of a smaller community. And I think in order to preserve that, the most important thing you could do is to plan. Plan how you grow. Plan on having building standards that maintain a community feel, a high standard that people can be proud of. I think those two things are very important to this city and to the people that put me here. I think that this whole process is a means to do that. If I did not do anything with annexation or planning for the future of the city, then I shouldn't sit here. And I will tell you right now, whether I vote yes or no for it, and I'm going to probably vote yes for it, the fruits of what we do tonight to this overall region, not to mention the people that put all of us here, I probably won't realize in my lifetime. But I think when people look back 20 years from now, they're going to be darn glad that we planned for the future and did it the right way. So I can't apologize for doing what I was put here to do. And I can't apologize for the job we've done as planning. I can't apologize for being attractive to developers. But as a result of planning, our mill levy now is less than it was in 1968, even with all the growth we've had. And when you consider all of that, I think that as much as my emotions may say one thing, the practical side of me tells me that we really need to do it in order to make it successful for everybody. Thank you.
Mr. Ingberg. Mr. Stubbe.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. I think the mayor did a good job as far as laying out a lot of good points relative to this whole process, and I plan on supporting this. It is a normal process. Growth does come with annexation. The state law gives us the ability to have a boundary, and it gives us the ability to essentially provide input with regard to what we expect in that particular area, because that, again, that's where the growth is. It's on the edge of the community. It also provides guidance to property owners and potential developers in that particular area, so they have an understanding with regard to what's going to happen within those particular areas. I've known Jim and Eleanor Piccone for many, many years, and empathize with them from the standpoint of her and her siblings having property that have been in their family for many, many years. I wish and I hope that we can provide some input to the assessor relative to the tax implications that may occur. But on the other hand, I think, you know, if you look at the area around Track F, which is your farm, there's a lot of things that have happened over the years. There's definitely development that has occurred in that particular area. The mayor indicated what the NRD is planning to do. Dan Hoynes indicated that the NRD is currently in the process of designing that dam. I talked to the NRD, two members of the NRD today, and confirmed that. They did indicate that the construction is planned within the next 5 years, and so you're going from a process of designing that particular flood control structure to potentially purchasing property with, again, the intent to construct that particular facility. So that's something that is known. It's currently ongoing. It is something that's been known for at least probably 10 years. I think early in 2000 is when there was a study that was done that essentially identified those particular flood control structures, which is where Prairie Queen is now, and the two additional ones to the east. So again, I plan on supporting this, and I hope and encourage the city administration to potentially work with you relative to, again, those tax implications, and hopefully we can provide some assistance to the assessor to provide you some relief in that particular area also. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Mumgard.
Mayor, I agree with everything you've said, and I'm glad that you brought that out. I just want to briefly comment about the so-called Springfield dispute that the media has made so much of lately. As I said a couple weeks ago when we addressed that, it's really unfortunate that that came up. It had nothing to do, in my view, with good municipal planning. It was solely a matter of civic pride. Civic pride is a good thing to have, but that was extending it way too far. And I will publicly commend the county board, our representatives on the county board, for wisely standing aside, not rushing into bad ideas, and not making a decision in their meeting last week, I believe. So I thank the county board for standing aside and not getting embroiled in a very silly dispute. Secondly, I want to look at the other side of town for a moment. The Cottonwood Eagle area, Eagle Ridge, Eagle Crest, Eagle Hills. We have a lot of people who sit out there who are our neighbors on the east side of town, and they are very eager to be annexed. A few weeks ago, I was approached by one of those residents as soon as this annexation plan came up, asking, well, why are you doing this goofy annexation off to the west when you've got this bunch of people out there who need to be annexed? He said, you know, don't annex over there, come annex us. We want to be part of your city. Well, they want to have their taxes go down, they want to have their water rates go down. Very good objectives for them. I explained to them that in my mind at all, it's just the economics of it all. That annexations are not driven by, you know, a number of people there and, you know, who needs to be part of the city solely. Certainly those are considerations, but they're largely driven by the pluses and minuses of valuation increases and cost of service. And that the cost of service of serving the eastern neighbors, the Eagles in Cottonwood, is just awfully high as opposed to the valuation. And he accepted that we weren't picking on them, we weren't ignoring them, that we were just doing something that really has very little to do with the east side of town. But I do want to go on record as making it clear that I am very eager to annex on the east side of town and bring in those many people who want to be part of our city, who aren't going to complain, whose taxes will go down, and will receive many benefits from being annexed into the city of Papillion. So as I've told you, Mayor, I hope within the next 3 years, we can make that a goal, that there will be an annexation on the east side of town, and we'll bring in all of our neighbors who will be very happy to join us. But as I explained to that resident, this really has nothing to do with them, is not a negative, and so if there are other people out there in the Eagles and Cottonwood who are scratching their head and wondering why this and not them, that's why, and I hope we can soon make them the subject of an annexation. Thank you.
Your comment was heard, and staff's actually doing some more analysis on that, but just because that did come up, education again for the public that watches this, SIDs sometimes do wonder, how do we get annexed? And a lot of it's actually in the SID's control. A lot of it has to go with their debt level, because when we annex, their debt becomes our debt, and we now have to service that. So there has to be enough revenue from the valuation to service that debt and to provide the added services. So it is just a business case. What a lot of SID boards, I don't think, realize is they believe that lower taxes is always better. So as an SID board, they vote to lower their levy. Well, what they just did is lowered the revenue that should be paying down their debt, so their debt stays higher longer, and then the longer it stays out there, the infrastructure goes down because they're not maintaining it, which then raises our cost when we go to annex it, and it gets into a cycle. 2 years ago, I believe, or just about 2 years ago, we actually reached out to every single SID board in our jurisdiction and invited them in for a meeting to educate them on how we do analysis, gave them the sheet that walks through the business case, and explained to them the impact of their tax policy on our ability to annex. For newer SIDs and newer developments, we actually are starting to draft some of that into the mixed use agreement of how much general obligation debt they can have, where the levy needs to be. So future SIDs will be on a path for faster annexation, but some of the older ones, we're still living with the SID board's tax policy. So I think some of them are just learning that now and starting to change their gears, but very valid comment. Any other council discussion? If not, please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item C2, ordinance 1716, an ordinance to change the official zoning map of the city of Papillion in accordance with section 20532 of the Papillion Municipal Code, to adopt a zoning map and to apply existing or future zoning regulations, property use regulations, building ordinances, electrical ordinances, plumbing ordinances, and all other regulatory ordinances of the city of Papillion pursuant to Nebraska Revised Statute 16901, and to provide for an effective date. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 1716? Motion by Councilman Stubbe. Second by Councilman Gaines. Any council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Councilman Stubbe. Second by Councilman Florence. Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
We are adjourned. Thank you.